Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Mum Show. Today we are going to be talking about raising our children in a very sexualised world. So grab yourself a cup of tea and a pen and paper and we will speak to you very shortly. Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Mum Show. My name's Marina, I'm your host and I'm joined again by child therapist Emma Brown and Pastor Claire Hooper.
Hello.
And today we're going to be having a chat about raising our children in a very sexualised culture. I don't know about you, but for me it's certainly a very different world to the one I grew up in. So how can we help navigate our kids to something that we don't yet fully understand? Thankfully, Emma, you are here to join us.
Yes, as the expert. She is our expert.
But you've got a long experience of working with teens, haven't you? In this,
yeah.
Is it right that you ran a clinic? Am I right for that?
Yeah, I mean, the clinic that I ran within the Child Adolescent Mental Health Service was specifically for children who were victims of sexual abuse.
Right.
And unfortunately, as you know, as we all hear in the media over the last few years, you know, it feels like it's rife, it's out there, and it's happening to our children. So I think there's various different ways we could approach this topic today, isn't there?
So what I'm really interested in, I guess, it feels, sometimes we live in a very polarised world, and we see whatever our computers generate at the time and that sort of thing. Do you think I'm right in saying that the world seems to become hypersexualised at the moment? The culture our kids are entering is like that.
Yeah,
Definitely.
definitely.
I know with you, Claire, with their teenagers as well. I think, obviously, you know, the idea of sex and pornography and sexual predators, they've been around for centuries.
Yes.
But again, the internet has accelerated it. It's exposed our children far earlier and to far more a greater degree. And actually, our children, I think, are far more tech savvy and can work their way around the internet far more than we can. We are, you know, I know we've said this before on the Mum Show, but we're kind of first-time generation parents, aren't we, dealing with the internet and how to parent through this. And it's a constant, I think, battle, and it's a constant kind of responsibility for us to kind of get ourselves educated and really, you know, instead of kind of fearing the internet and worrying about it and just sticking some parental controls on there and hoping for the best, I think we need to get involved as much as possible.
Enough. Parental controls are not enough.
Definitely not.
They can't parent your children for you either. They can't help you. We're there to coach and train and equip our children how to live in the world that they're in at the moment.
Yeah, and a lot of the young people today know how to get around the parent controls anyway.
Oh, of
course. So they definitely aren't enough.
But it's not just that either, because I know that, you know, a lot of kids, they may not actually want to go and look and explore,
true.
but that doesn't mean you're not surrounded by a huge number of other people that are in that kind of environment. That stuff is happening, and you can't, I mean, I didn't grow up in this environment, but I remember being 14, and just being female and 14 left you open to certain cultures and left you open to certain conversations when you walk down the street. But that's even more so now. Even if you were to remove all internet access, which I don't recommend doing, that doesn't remove them from what's happening in culture, does it, and in society?
Even with the purest of searches on a YouTube or on Instagram or anywhere like that, you cannot filter those searches, and out there is material that nobody should be seeing, let alone our children. So it is out there and accessible through algorithms, and that's a computer you can't even I suppose factor in for that. This is not even about the way humans do things. It's algorithms that have been put together, what videos show next, what it offers you to come and see, what picture that's in your explore button. You know, you've got that little section, you've got your Instagram page, then you've got your explore, things that you might be interested in, regardless of whether you are or not. It hopes that it's got it right for you, the system and the computer generated program you're in.
Yeah, and it's not just the dark the dark web as we know it either, or even pornography. It's there in every area of consumerism as well.
That is true.
A friend of mine told me that they went into a well-known young person's female clothes shop, and as she was in there shopping with her daughter, and she saw on one of the billboards, this is an advertisement in the shop saying, "Send me your nudes." And that was,
You're joking.
no, it was a play on words because it was around the makeup, and we all kind of, as women who wear makeup,
like nude makeup.
nude makeup, nude lipstick shades. But actually, the double message was, of course, what our young people have to deal with at the moment.
Yeah.
Which is the culture of
Yeah.
sexting, sending
Absolutely.
naked messages of themselves.
Yeah.
Which I find that really, this has got to be having an impact on our kids. Like, it's not just a case of trying to protect them from it, but living in that environment with that huge pressure, especially at a time when either it's too young, very young for them, and it's impacting, like they can't process that information, or whether it's in the teens when they're already vulnerable. Do we know yet what sort of impact some of this is happening? Are you seeing kind of the fruits of that?
That's a good question.
Oh, absolutely. I think, the impact is huge from, the kind of one end of the spectrum where children are left really traumatised, and where it is about safeguarding our children because they've been exposed to images purposefully, or they've been encouraged to look at, explicit images or videos, or worse, they've been sexually abused themselves, right through to the impact on self-esteem, particularly for our young girls, where body image and where, on the likes of Instagram, apparently my daughter told me that there's certain rules in which that you need to follow to take the best selfie. And I've worked with girls who would sit and take hundreds of pictures of themselves in order to get the right one to send, and then to generate the most likes. I mean, and that's just shocking, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's so sad that our young girls would feel that way about themselves, and their whole self-esteem and self-worth is based on how many likes they get, what their body looks like.
I mean, we often talk about how negative ruminating is.
Yeah.
I mean, that is just that cycle, isn't it? Not good enough, not good enough, not good enough, not good enough.
Yeah.
Even the motion to pull down and refresh forces the brain to ruminate, to think, okay, so you pull down the button, you watch the little button go round, and you're either rewarded with something red, and that's good, and that makes you feel good, or you're rewarded with nothing, and that makes you feel like bad. I mean, you've got, what the chemicals are, like, I just know the feel good, feel bad. But it's the ruminating, it's the ruminating and replaying things over and over and over again, and it's so harmful to the brain to do that. And so when you are then using yourself, your most private personal self, as a commodity to then gain approval and satisfaction, it can be never ending, and it's so difficult for our children. I think actually there's become a super tolerance to things among our young people at times, where it's a commodity and that's what they accept, which I think is even more dangerous. That actually there's a sliding scale, isn't there? A lot of children wouldn't even still now be in the stage where a lot of younger children, even young teens, will still not even be considering or thinking that they would ever do that. But in a couple of years, they're going to be asked by somebody, or they're going to be offered an opportunity to see something or be a part of something that isn't necessarily a sexually intimate act, which is where me growing up, that was the challenges that we faced as a young Christian. We know whether you've gone into a bedroom with somebody or lay down with somebody, or you've gone further there. Now we're not even getting to that point. The relationships are starting online before they even get, and they've been intimate and they've shared an intimate moment with somebody. We just have to educate and equip our children to know what to do with their private, innermost selves, I think.
So, and coming from that angle, what do you think is the right sort of age to start talking to your kids about sex? Which, can I just say, this is hugely controversial. So there's going to be loads of people that disagree with this.
Yeah. I think it's so personal. You know your kids, don't you?
I think
mine too. We're all different ages.
I think for me, but I'm very aware that I'm hugely driven by the work that I've done in the past with very, very vulnerable young children. I think it's sooner than you think.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think what we need to start is the conversation pretty much as soon as they can. They're kind of walking, talking. 4 or 5 years old, I would be teaching them about the parts of their body.
I would definitely, what they do, what they're for, and Yeah.
And what's private and what
Yeah.
isn't. You know, there's
That's right.
there's an idea about the underpants rule and the swimming suit rule. So anything that's covered by a swimsuit is private and it's yours. And we
Yes,
educate our
absolutely.
children about safe touch and about, you know, what to do if they, you know, if somebody tries to touch them in those areas, and empowering them and helping them to think that, you know, they're in charge of their own bodies, and they have the ability to say no, and they would know exactly what to do. You know, who would you go and tell? What would you do? And, you know, and not to keep secrets, the idea of what a secret is and things like that.
Yeah.
So I would say right from really, really early on, we'd be talking openly about that. And if you do that, then kind of gradually, as the child gets older, you kind of have a very open dialogue, an open relationship with your child. And then the other stuff kind of then just becomes more natural, doesn't it? You start to be
It's
able
not
to
a big
talk
conversation where all of a sudden you're exploring the difference between man and woman. As they've grown up, you've explained to them certain parts as they've needed to know. That's what we've done, definitely.
I found
Talking about periods and puberty and you know, the changes that your body goes through as you grow up. I wanted to get in at least before the school, and we managed to have conversations much earlier than that, but I didn't want my children to be learning from a school teacher, their perspective, because I've been in those lessons myself, and some of those teachers aren't confident to be talking about those subjects. They're put under pressure to talk to the children. I'm like, I want my children to know that what God has given us for good and how to use our bodies for good.
And I think ultimately they don't have the relationship, do they? For your child to then ask a question and even just frankly finding out amongst all your peers at that age is rubbish.
Yeah, it is.
That's the last thing you want to be doing, sat with 29 other peers, you know, talking. You're not going to feel free and able to explore that. I love the idea of just, I try with my children to be really open just about the body as well. So things that are really natural, and I'll say to my daughter who's 9 for a long time now, or when you get to a certain age and your body changes, and we say it really naturally so that she never gets to the point where it's like this, what do you mean my body changes? You know, she always knows. Oh, of course, when you get to a teenager and your body changes, and it's just trying to, I don't know, I think this is so personal anyway within families, and it's personal with the children that you have, and you can't really, I don't think you can label this is what you have to do. You almost
it's not
just
prescriptive. No.
Yeah, you need to know your children, and you need to know what your children are facing.
What I would say
and then
is
be intentional.
And don't avoid it. Don't avoid it because it feels uncomfortable for you, you know. And often we talk about it a lot on this show. We parent the way that often we were parented. So, you know, and I don't know about you two, but you know, I don't really remember my parents talking to me about that. I remember them buying me a Christian book, and I think I watched, you know, kind of a video on a VHS video about relationships and things like that. But I learnt a huge amount from my peer group, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that either.
Oh, yeah, it adds to it, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's a really important rite of passage, isn't it?
Yeah.
Part of their processing, isn't it?
Of course,
Part of them understanding and
but we can't avoid this topic as parents. We absolutely can't.
Let's not. Shall we hear from some teens?
Yes.
We've got 3 great teens who are ready to give us their opinions. So let's have a look at what they've got to say.
Okay, kids, action! How big a deal is sex to teenagers?
Way over the top. Everyone was just like, I want it at this age and I want to do it with this person. It's just like, what's the point? Leave it.
There's like a lot of people in our year that have probably lost their virginity, or at least say they have, to like gain popularity.
I think there's more pressure. I'm not really sure what else to say.
How do people put pressure on each other?
Let's say, oh, okay, you're going out with this person, you might as well just do it, just get it over with. Like, even in year 9, let's just say it. It's just, like, there's a lot of peer pressure.
From my personal experience, about 5 guys that I've started talking to, they'll suddenly just message me saying, can I have nudes? No. I've got a funny story. I was so worried because this guy messaged me saying, can I have nudes? And I've been talking to him for a couple of days, and then I called Sam saying, what should I do? And we both were kind of confused because this was probably one of the first times that someone's asked, so so us being a bit stupid, we came up with tudes.
Oh no. Oh no.
So I sent him a picture of my toe. So and then said, "Is that okay?" And he replied with, "A bit higher, please." And I was really disgusted at this point because I didn't know what was going on. So I blocked him eventually, but yeah. It's kind of upsetting when you've been talking to a guy and and you kind of like them, and then they ask for nudes. It kind of just makes you feel like you're being used.
I'm not really sure because I'm not really bothered.
How do you keep out of it, Ellie?
I'm away a lot of the time. I go to like a couple of my friends' parties, but not all of them. And I think sometimes just staying out of the way a bit, like always being busy, because I'm like always busy.
I can't imagine you never not being busy.
So, Libby, would you like to, how could you have been better prepared for those messages that you were receiving?
I feel like if anyone had told me, someone is probably going to ask you to take a picture of yourself naked, I probably would have said, why? I would have been really confused.
Do you think that pornography is seen a lot by kids your age?
I'd say pornography is very popular. Like, I don't watch it because I think it's disgusting. But I know quite a lot of people who do, and they're quite open about it.
Like, what is the point? It's basically prostitution being recorded.
I don't really see anything wrong with it, but it's definitely a thing that's popular.
I think it's gross.
Yes.
Looking at them.
I love their honesty.
Oh, totally.
They just go there, don't they? They're like, you want this conversation, bring it on.
Because it's so normalised though in their world.
Yeah,
So
that's so true.
normal in their world.
Absolutely.
But I do think it's important to recognise that whether we were coming at this from a faith point of view or not, it is recognised that pornography is not good for the brain.
true.
It is not good for the person, and it is really not good for children.
No,
Like, it's just not a good place to go, is it?
No, and like we've said before, really young children are being exposed to pornography. It's at the click of a button, literally, and it's there for anybody who wanted to access it, either on purpose or by accident.
And it sets the wrong standards, doesn't it? It sets the wrong ideas.
Oh, absolutely. What messages is that giving to our young men who are watching that, thinking, is this the way to treat women? Is this what women want in the bedroom? Is this how women should dress? Is this what I should? Is this how I should be behaving towards women?
So confusing.
Absolutely.
So confused in the way.
And for girls, you know, the whole, you know, I think the body image is hard enough, and then you kind of look at the pornographic images and you see the kind of perfect female body that is totally unrealistic, but it's what girls think, that maybe I need to look like that in order for boys to like me, or in order to be happy, or in order to get my needs met.
Thinking, I'll never look like that, so I'll never be good enough.
Absolutely.
You know, so not necessarily even trying to look like that, but somewhere believing that that is the perfect image, and that, you know what, I'll never be that, which is totally not God. You know, we have all we need in Christ.
And it
So
frustrates me because it is such an assault, because we are created relational. We are created to join together. This is a gift for us, and yet all of a sudden it's just, you know, kids need
opposite. It's the absolute opposite of what Christ intended for sex, isn't it?
That's right.
Like, and I have hopefully feel like I've instilled that in both my girls about what sex is. When we've had those discussions, it's about you know, loving your body, loving your partner's body. It's an act of love. It's an act of union. It's an act of creation.
Yes.
And it's the complete opposite to the messages that pornography gives our children.
I think what I find difficult, what I find really sad, is that actually even when you're not in that, because all of those girls were like, well, sorry, 2 girls and a boy, you know, they weren't, that wasn't the environment they wanted to be in. But I think Libby at one point was like confused and hurt and felt a bit used. You know, it's like, oh, I thought we were having genuine relationship and you were only looking for something else. As a mum of a boy, I also feel really sad for boys Because I think you're being set up for money. They're setting you up for money because you're going to be their cash cow. You're going to be the one that's going to be paying for all this.
Women access pornography as well, on the rise as well. I know there's not as high a percentage, but it is definitely a high proportion of women still accessing those things as well from the pastoring that we do with people. Can I tell you what the Bible says?
Please do.
Because this is a great scripture. This is the Message translation. It's long, so I'm going to read it for you, but it's from Corinthians. There's more to sex than mere skin on skin. Sex is as much a spiritual mystery as a physical fact. As written in the scripture, the two become one. And since we want to become spiritually one with the Master, we must not pursue the kind of sex that avoids commitment and intimacy, leaving us more lonely than ever, the kind of sex that can never become one. There is a sense in which sexual sins are different from others, but in sexual sin we violate the sacredness of our own bodies, these bodies that were made for God, given and God-modelled love for becoming one with one another. Or didn't you realise that your body is a sacred place, the place of the Holy Spirit? Don't you see that you can't live however you please, squandering what God paid such a high price for? The physical part of you is not some piece of property belonging to you. The spiritual part of you, God owns the whole works. So let people see God through your body. Amazing. What a precious piece of writing, and beautifully described in the Message there. I know that that is a slight change in the original text, but it describes to us that our body is not a commodity. It is not something that we can give away and take from somebody else. And in the same sense that we allow people to take from us that is not theirs, we take from other people what is theirs, what is not theirs to give, which is what Libby's saying. In actual fact, God didn't give us permission to take from that person what we might be choosing to watch or see. It's the respect and honour that we would give to somebody else to set them up to win. So why would we not? It says, the word says, to treat everybody as our mother, our sisters. And so when we're viewing that woman or that man in that act, what are we thinking about them when we do that? Were we treating them as a human being as God sees them, or are we treating them just as this image in a little box that we're watching?
Well, Libby said, didn't she, that she felt used by
that
boy.
That made me really upset, actually.
Yeah, well, it made
really
me
sad.
absolutely
As
fuming.
I
mean, thankfully, she did talk to me about that when it happened, and she genuinely thought she had a friendship with this boy who, seemed like a really nice boy as well. But
it probably is.
Yeah, I've tackled that head on. I got a phone. A message came through to one of my. We take all phones at night. I've got an adult son now, so I don't take his phone. But we put them and we plug them in outside our bedroom, and because actually the night time, a lot of bad stuff. Nothing good happens after about 10 o'clock at night. So we take it all, and they go to bed, and it's like peace in your mind, peace in your bedroom. Take it out of the way. Anyway, I woke up in the middle of the night. I went downstairs and I was like, something's going on. I just felt an unrest inside of me. And I normally sleep through. And I went outside to see that a message had been sent to my son asking him for a nude. Anyway, so I just tackled it head on. I phoned the young girl myself and I said, hey, I don't think you were expecting it, but I picked up a phone message from you.
Did you phone
her? On his phone? On his phone, yeah.
So she thought he was calling?
Yeah, I was really honest up front though. I said, hey, it's my son's mum, and I said which son it was, and I said, I think you're better than that. I said, I think you're better than that. I need you to know that I've accepted this message, but I think you're better than that. I don't think you need to be doing that. There's a commodity. And I explained to her in a room. She was obviously a bit awkward and embarrassed, but I didn't want to just come down really hard. I wanted to be able to stop that moment, stop a train wreck. As parents, sometimes it's your time to stop the traffic, because nobody else is going to do that if you let that go on and on and on. So, yeah, that's what I did. I don't know whether other people have the courage to do it, but
I love it. I love it as well. But I think we have to just respond very individually, don't we?
Totally.
You knew your son in that moment, and you knew what was the right way to respond. But I think we can't underestimate the pressure that young people feel within that context. And
so with that in mind, because I think there's going to be a lot of parents that go, we know, we agree with you. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? What tools can we give them? Because I reckon they'll agree with us, but I reckon they're probably desperately asking for a few tools to actually help address this with their teens or younger children.
Well, I'd certainly agree with Claire. I'd say kind of put the boundaries in place as early as possible. So kind of particularly around that transition to secondary school time, when young people do tend to have their own mobile phones and their own kind of access to the internet. So you put those boundaries in place, make it a rule right from the start that after a certain time at night, parents still need to keep them set. But don't just say this is the way it is. Explain to them. Have that conversation about why, and that leads me on to the more obvious, but again, just start the dialogue really, really early. Understand that, you know, this is a reality. Don't think that your child, for whatever reason, is going to be protected somehow by some, you know, just because they go to church or because of your faith. You know, that they're in the world. And they're going to, you know, we have no control over that. But what we can do is equip our children to really understand what's going on for them, and understand that you know, sometimes it's a pressure to, you know, it's a pressure to conform, or to kind of that sense of belonging that teenagers have. Sometimes they're really fearful of saying no. Sometimes that, you know, the risk of saying no is huge for them. And for other young people, it's about kind of getting their self-esteem needs met. If I do this for this person, then maybe I'll get some of what I need, and that goes back to how we can kind of fill up their self-esteem.
Yeah, I was going to say actually, and I don't know because I haven't got teens yet, so I'm just I'm pre-guessing, but I can imagine that a really good approach could be to be really relational with your teens and with your kids, because if they've got a depth of relationship, I think it's really. What I try and do is project, like, this is the kingdom culture that we're aiming for. So actually what we're aiming for is loads better than the quick rewards. We've talked about that in other episodes, haven't we? There's a quick reward that you can go for. But can I tell you, there is so much more for you. There is so much better for you out there. And if we give them a flavour of that through the way that the depth of relationship that we can have with them. So that thing you talk about of feeling felt, I'm going to really know you, and we're going to explore other things, and there's so much more to your life. I don't think that's necessarily enough, but I do think that it gives them a bigger picture to know that what feels like it's pressing in on them and squashing them, that isn't everything. And I just found it interesting that one of the girls, Ellie on the VT, who's, you know, I spoke to her about it and I was like, you have a very different approach. And she was like, I'm fencing, I'm doing my sport. She was like, that's my passion, that's what I'm interested in life. And you know, I do think there is, like I say, I haven't been there yet, but I'm interested to see the difference when we give our kids a different narrative and a bigger vision and a broader spectrum of what they can walk into. You know, I just think that's why God asks us to build a kingdom culture, because he knows that actually that's the best place for us to be.
Totally.
Any tips, Claire?
Well, I've blogged about this, so we can attach it to the show notes if you want
Brilliant.
to.
We absolutely will.
I think a really practical blog on things that we've done as a family, 10 top tips. And also there's 2 books that I can recommend, Every Young Woman's Battle and Every Young Man's Battle. And again, we could put a link to that on the website. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Every Young Man's Battle, excellent. I had my children read them when they were entering into this stage of life, and we read them first. Super practical, super helpful, quite honest. So you've got to be prepared if you know that those things are going to help to teach your children how to bring the Christian faith into what they're going to be facing.
And
I was just going to say, you know, giving your child permission that if they do make a bad choice, or if they do happen to kind of click on that website or go that, you know, take it a bit too far or whatever, that they can come back from it. There's always that space to kind of come back. And hopefully, like we say, if you've got that depth of relationship with your young person, they'll perhaps feel more able to share that with you.
I love that, because it brings everything, all of this chaos and all of this turmoil, it always brings it back to the cross, doesn't it? There is always a way back. There is always a way back. You are never lost and sucked into this, which is just so powerful, isn't it? I think as parents, we need to hold that so central to every element of our parenting. There is always a way back, and just giving them that narrative. Well, there we go. We hope you've enjoyed that conversation. Like Claire said, we will make sure on our website, if you go and have a look at promisecollective.co.uk, we're going to have some 10 top tips for dealing with your children around this subject. And we'll also make sure we put some recommendations. If you're feeling in a struggle, then do check it out and have a look and get some help. Don't let yourself feel alone in this. Thank you so much for joining us once again. We will catch you very soon on The Mum Show. Bye.
Hello parents, don't forget to say hello. We're at promisecollective.co.uk. Bye!